תזכו לשנים רבות, נעימות וטובות. קהל קדוש. Tonight's shiur has been dedicated in memory of Menachem Meni ben Hannah, Hannah bat Rachel, Ava bat Ilana Esther, and Asi ben Zahava. Ruach Adonai tenichem began Eden. Amen. I was told that this is the ninth year that we've been getting together the nights before Yom Kippurim at this event. This definitely is an example of time flies when you're having fun. It does not seem to me like 9 years, but Baruch Hashem, I pray that we'll be able to all continue this meeting for years to come in good health, in good spirit. This congregation never disappoints. There's always a beautiful crowd, and I also know that it's an intellectual crowd, bright, smart people, which allows me to talk a little higher than I'm accustomed to in other places. I will not tell you what those places are, but suffice it to say that over here I'm comfortable to speak on a higher level. So let's get right down to the business at hand. I do have a hidush to reveal tonight. It's a novel idea, but it needs to be built correctly in stages, step by step. So I ask for your indulgence to follow the steps, but Be'ezat Hashem, at the end, we'll reveal some nice new ideas. So we're coming to Yom Kippurim. Every holiday has a masechet in Shas that explains the holiday. So the holiday of Rosh Hashanah is called Rosh Hashanah. The holiday for Sukkot has Masechet Sukkah. And if you go to Pesach, so you have Masechet Pesachim, and so on and so forth. The Masechet that is dedicated to the laws of Yom Kippurim is called Yomah. Yomah just means the day. And the great rabbi called Maharsha says, because it's the day, it is the greatest and most significant day of the year. So you don't have to say Masechet Yom Kippurim. It's enough to say Masechet Yomah, and everybody knows what's the day. The day has to be the one day of the year. But if I can then quote from his opening comments to the Masechet, he writes, Yom Kippurim hu Yom Echad Kadosh Bashana. Yom Kippurim is a holy day. And then he questions that the Masechet begins with the following words, Shiv'at Yamim, 7 days. 7 days before Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol would make his way to the Beit HaMikdash, to his office, in order to prepare. You know, it's a very, very rigorous day. The Kohen Gadol does all the work himself, no help. So he needs to practice. So there was a 7-day practice run that the Kohen Gadol would do a week before. So the Masechet Yomah begins with the following words, Shiv'at Yamim, 7 days. So the Maharsha finds in that introductory words a lesson. And he writes, Umatchil Belashon Shiv'at Yamim. The Masechet starts with the word Shiv'at Yamim, 7 days. Al Shem HaKedusha. When you hear the number 7, 7 connotes holiness. Ki hazayin kadosh bechol makom. The 7s are always holy. Maybe not in a casino, but the 7s are holy. And the perfect example would be Shabbat. 6 days are weekday, mundane. Shabbat is number 7. You enter the level of Kodesh. So he says, Yom Kippur also comes from the world of 7. World of 7? Why does it come from the world of 7? This year Yom Kippur is on a Monday. It's not on a Shabbat. So how does Yom Kippur relate to Shiv'at Yamim? Shabbat is from the world of 7. Yom Kippur, it's on the 10th of Tishri. What has that got to do with the number 7? So he says a tremendous Hadush. He says, how many Jewish holidays do we have in the course of the year? And how many days do we have that are Yamim Tovim? So I'll go through them. Now usually to know the Yamim Tovim, you have to ask your non-Jewish workers, because they know the calendar better than we know it, because they know the days that they're going to get off of work. But nonetheless, I'll go through the Yamim Tovim. It's from the Torah I'm talking now, from the Torah. One day Rosh Hashanah. Even though we have 2 days, but it's considered one long day. Feels like one long day. One day Rosh Hashanah. Pesach, we have 1 day in the beginning, 1 day in the end. Sukkot, 1 day in the beginning, 1 day in the end. Shavuot is 1 day. So there are 6 Yamim Tovim from the Torah. And let me tell you something about these 6 days that are Yom Tov. They're holidays, but they're not like Shabbat. Because on Shabbat, you're not allowed to cook and you're not allowed to carry. But on Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook and you're allowed to carry. So it's not called Shabbat. If you look at the language in the Torah, when it introduces Yom Tov, it's called Shabbaton. You see, there's a difference between a Shabbat and a Shabbaton. Shabbat is strict. Shabbaton, there's room for leniency. It's a Yom Tov, but you can carry and you can cook and you can do some melacha. So there are 6 Yamim Tovim that are called Shabbatons. What is the 7th holiday of the year? The 7th holiday of the year is a 1-day holiday. It's called Yom Kippur. Now, how does the Torah refer to Yom Kippur? Shabbat Shabbaton. Now, what does that mean? Shabbat Shabbaton means, says the Maharsha, that it is the Shabbat of the Shabbatons. There are 6 Shabbatons, and if you want to know the 7th day of the Shabbatons, it is the Shabbat of the Shabbatons, it is Yom Kippur. So the Maharsha, and incidentally, Yom Kippur, you can't cook and you can't carry, so it has the element of Shabbat, but it's an element of Yom Tov as well. So what Shabbat is to the 6 days of the week, Yom Kippur is to the 6 holidays. So in that sense, it also is connected to the number 7. It is the 7th of the holidays, hence it is Shabbat Shabbaton. Nice introduction. And that's why the Mishnah in Masechet Yomah begins Shiv'at Yamim, hinting to us Kippur is also Shiv'at Yamim. It is the 7th day. Well, if that's the case, it goes on to say that there's another comparison between Yom Kippur and Shabbat. What could it be? So he says that we know that Shabbat is referred to in the books as Me'en Olam Haba. It's paradise. If anybody wants to taste what Olam Haba is all about, just keep Shabbat. Thank you, Shalom. I appreciate that. Shabbat is a futurama of what Olam Haba is going to be. It's not exactly Olam Haba, but you get the flavor of it. We all know that. We all anticipate and wait for the Shabbat, and we enjoy the Shabbat to the extent that we probably cannot imagine what life would be without a Shabbat. As a matter of fact, in my synagogue, we enjoy the Shabbat so much that, well, I'll be honest with you, that we probably get out a little later than most of the synagogues in the neighborhood. And when the committee came to me and said, what's the big idea? What are we getting out so late? I said, we're in Olam Haba. When you go to a hotel, don't you ask for a late checkout? So it's a late checkout. I'm enjoying myself. What do I want to get my money's worth. I want to stay to the end. I want to stay extra. So Shabbat is Me'en Olam Haba, and we know it. The Hidush of the Maharsha says is, Yom Kippur is also Me'en Olam Haba. Now that's a Hidush to me, because I never thought that Yom Kippur is Olam Haba. I never looked at Yom Kippur as paradise. I looked at it as a daunting day. It's a difficult day. It's an agonizing day. Put it this way, when it's over, we're happy that it's behind us. doesn't have the flavor to me as Olam Haba. Olam Haba is something that we look forward to. Yom Kippur, although we like the fact that Yom Kippur happened, but while it's happening, it's not the most enjoyable experience. So what does the Maharsha mean when he says Yom Kippur is Olam Haba, but then he doubles down? Now if I could quote his language just for accuracy, he writes, Uchmo shehashabbat dugmat olam haba, and just like the Shabbat has similarities to olam haba, ken hu Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippurim also has that similarity, but then he doubles down and says, V'yoter mimenu. It's even more. Which is, if you put Shabbat and Yom Kippur on the scale and you ask, which day is more, which day has a closer affinity to Olam Haba, it's Kippur. And the question is why? So he says, very simple. One of the features of Olam Haba is there's no eating and there's no drinking. We all remember when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to get the Torah. So it says he went 40 days without any physical nourishment. And don't think that that was considered a sacrifice on Moshe Rabbeinu's part. He didn't eat because you don't have to eat. There's no urge to eat. It's all spiritual nourishment. Therefore, the body does not need any of the normal caloric intake that it has in this world. Olam haba en bo lo achila velo shetiyah. So says the Maharsha, well, Shabbat has eating and drinking. So it's really not a perfect Olam haba. It's Olam haba with a menu. But that's not exactly what it is. So if you really want to have the closer example to Olam haba, or if you want to have the closer experience to Olam haba, it's Kippur. Kippur, the fact that they took away the eating and the drinking, and all that we're having on that day is spiritual infusions for 25 plus hours, that's basically an image or the culture of what Olam haba is going to be like. Lo achila velo shtiyah, just sitting and nehenim and benefiting from Ziva Shekhinah. Now that's an eye-opener to me. That Yom Kippur is Olam haba. It explains to me why some of the rabbis on Motzei Kippur used to cry that it was over. Because they felt that they were in ecstasy. They felt the removal of the physicality, and that they felt that they were subliming themselves to a higher plane, to a higher standard, higher living, a higher place. And then when it's over, you have to go back to, back down to Olam Hazeh. And they didn't look forward to that. So they had a certain mixed feelings when Kippur ended. Let that serve as an introduction. I think that's a new perspective. Yom Kippur is the 7th holiday. It's a Shabbat. And if it's a Shabbat, it's got to be like Olam haba. And not only is it like Olam haba, but it's actually the closest day on the calendar that we have that's connected to Olam haba. That being said, I would like to introduce to you on a deeper level the connection between Yom Kippurim and the fact that there's no eating and drinking. I understand that it's in order to replicate Olam haba, but there's a deeper interpretation. Our rabbis tell us in the Zohar, a little biology for a couple of minutes. In biology, they tell us that we have 248 limbs in our body. That's a fact. I counted them before I came. That's why I was a couple of minutes late. Now, I don't know what the orthopedics are saying at Harvard, but I trust the words of the Talmud that if they tell me there's 248 limbs, there's 248 limbs. That's a fact. And they also say that it corresponds to 248 positive commandments that we have in the Torah. That means each limb can be paired up against the mitzvah. Means if you went and took a skeleton, you could write on each limb which mitzvah it corresponds. And in the olden days, when a person had a certain ailment, they would go to the local rabbi who was a Kabbalist, and they would say, my elbow is hurting. And he would be able to say which mitzvah corresponds to elbow, and he would tell him, listen, be careful on that mitzvah, and it'll go away. It's not tennis elbow, it's not pickleball. The reason why you have the problem with the elbow is because you're not careful in that specific mitzvah. There was a famous rabbi called Arizal. One time a guy came to him, and his shoulder was hurting. And Arizal said, yeah, that's my maharonim. Do you wash your hands before Birkat HaMazon? He says, actually, I do. He says, yeah, but do you talk? After you make my maharonim, do you talk or do you make Birkat HaMazon immediately? He says, to be honest with you, I talk. He said, well, that explains your shoulder. He said, what's one thing got to do with the other? He says, because the Gemara says in Berachot, tekef lintila beracha. That immediately after you make netilah, my maharonim, make Birkat HaMazon. You don't do tekef. So God switched the letters of tekef and made it ketef. Ketef is a shoulder. So he says, you start being careful on the tekef and your ketef will get better. Now, I'm sure if you went to a regular doctor and told him you have a shoulder problem, and you tell him, oh, by the way, just want a full disclosure, I talk after my maharonim. He's going to say, that's got nothing to do with it, I promise you. That's not why your shoulder's hurting. But if you went to the Arizal, he would say, that's everything. Stop talking and your shoulder will feel better. So I actually have a book at home. Last night I was in Englewood, and they had a bunch of doctors there. And I told them I have a book at home that actually corresponds a lot of the limbs to the mitzvot. And a few doctors, they attacked me after the class. We need the book. This is unconventional medicine. You're going to cure people now from the source. But then it goes even further. We have in our body, more biology for a minute, 365 gidim. You know what a gid is? A gid the sophisticated word is a sinew, a ligament. Basically, it's the threads that attach the flesh to the bone. So there are 365 of those. The Zohar HaKadosh says that the 365 ligaments actually correspond to 365 negative commandments in the Torah. So there you go again. You could make a chart by pointing out each ligament against which negative commandment. And back to last night, a lady came to me after the class and said that she's been suffering from sciatic. And the sciatic is a gid. It's a ligament, it's a nerve, whatever it may be, but it's in the gid family. So she said, please, Rabbi Mansour, if you could find for me what mitzvah, what negative commandment corresponds, and I promise you I will be meticulous in it because it's very, very painful. I said, I don't have it. You just have to read Dr. Sarno's book a couple more times. I don't have the Lot Taseh for that. But the old rabbis knew it. And then they go on to say that there's something else that equals 365. 365 days in the year. So the Zohar HaKadosh writes that every day of the year corresponds one of the sinew or ligaments of the person's body. Kind of interesting. I know you're thinking to yourself, well, what's the difference? Who cares? But you'll see that it makes a difference. That means if you were making a calendar, maybe we should tell the PTA, the new calendar should be, tell me the date, tell me what time sunrise is, what time sunset is, tell me the daf hayumi so I know which page to learn, and then tell me what is the ligament of the day. So today, September, whatever it is, corresponds ligament number 78, and it's connected to the right side of the brain, and so on and so forth. So therefore, I should know something. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, we don't have a calendar like that, and most of the Gidim, we don't know which day it corresponds. We don't have that information. But the great rabbi called Arizal, that's the Kabbalist of 500 years ago in Sfat, he revealed to us the ligament of Yom Kippur. Now this is significant now, because if I were to ask our members here tonight, now we're trying to find Yom Kippur on our body. It's somewhere on our body. It's represented. Where would you point? Exactly, that's what I would point. I would point to the head. Head, it's a lot of thinking, a lot of contemplation. Maybe you point to the mouth, a lot of praying. In the shul that I pray in, they sell the aliyot for a lot of money. Maybe you point to your pocket. But the point is, I think that's the areas of the body. Maybe you point to your heart. Some people cry on Yom Kippur. They might point to their eyes, to their tear ducts. So they asked the Arizal this question: where is Yom Kippur on the body? And he said, oh, it's definitely there. It's represented very, very prominently. But in order to understand where Yom Kippur is on the body, you need an introduction. Now, this is important information. This might actually be an idea that I will present to you for your New Year's resolution. It's something easy, it's non-evasive, and like I said, doesn't take too much effort to fulfill, and it's a big mitzvah. Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin says the following, I'm quoting, Le'olam yizaher adam לסדר שולחנו במוצאי שבת, אף על פי שאינו צריך אלא לכזית. So he says that a person should be meticulous and careful to set his table on Saturday night, Motzei Shabbat, in order to have a meal. Now the meal does not have to be a lavish meal. Maran Shulchan Aruch writes, it just has to be a kizayit. Kizayit is 30 grams of bread. And then the question is, why? I don't think anybody, well, I don't think maybe anybody, most people, Motzei Shabbat, are already mealed out. We've had 3 meals on Shabbat. And especially for people that are only used to 2 meals a day, on Shabbat we have 3 meals. So when Motzei Shabbat comes, we're willing to pass on the 4th meal called Seudat Revi'it. It's not like anybody has an appetite. So Shulchan Aruch has to say, I know that. We know that nobody is hungry and nobody is actually looking forward to this, but nonetheless you should do it. Yizahir. And the question is why? If we're not in the mood, if we ate the whole day, why does the halakha force us or demand for us to eat the 4th meal? Seudat Revi'it, or as you call it, the Melave Malka. And it's a big item. There was a rabbi called the Gaon Mevilna. His wife used to fast from Motzei Shabbat to Friday. She would fast the whole week, 6 days straight. Tzadeket. One time the Gaon of Vilna found out that she started the fast on Saturday night before she ate Melave Malka. And the Gaon of Vilna told his wife, you were tzaddiket, but all those fasts are not worth too much if you're going to miss Melave Malka. Imagine that, fasting 6 days, and he's saying that kizayit is more important. Don't skip the Melave Malka. Our great rabbi called Ben Ish Hai, on the following pasuk says, Hine sulam mutzav arza, v'rosho magia hashamayma. You remember Yaakov Abinu had the dream, and he dreamt of the ladder? So the ladder, it says, was planted on the ground. Sulam mutzav arza. But the head of the ladder was in the heavens. Ben Ish Hai homiletically says, the word sulam is an acronym for the words Seudat Levayat Malka. So he says, V'hine sulam, when it comes to Seudat Levayat Malka, mutzav arza, it's thrown to the ground. People belittle it, they mistreat it, they deride it, they don't give it the respect that it deserves. The sulam is mutzav arza. But you know what he says? V'rosho magia hashamai. If you'd only know, its level reaches the highest echelons in heaven. So therefore, don't belittle the Melave Malka. The question is, but what's so important about it? Why is the Gaon of Vilna forcing his wife to eat it? Why is the Ben Ish Chai saying it reaches the highest levels in heaven? What's so significant about this meal? So I'd like to tell you what Rabbi Yosef Karo writes in Bet Yosef, from a sefer called Shibbolei Haleket. Now listen closely. Back to the biology of the body. There's a small limb or bone on the body. It is called the luz bone. Lamed Vav Zayin. Luz. The Zohar Kadosh says it's the size of an almond. It's very small. In Arabic, we say loz. Loz is an almond. And the bone is called the luz bone. Where is it? Well, according to most opinions, it's probably that ball on top of the spine. You put your finger in the back, on top of the spine, on top of the vertebrae, you feel like a protrusion coming out. That's the luz bone. What do we know about this bone? Well, the Gemara says, and the Zohar confirms, it's indestructible. I'm quoting from a book now, just for accuracy, Mateh Moshe. He tells us about the luz bone is like kryptonite. He says, V'kasher yamuta adam, after 120, when a person passes, ha'etzem hahu, this bone eno nimoach, it doesn't decay. V'lo nifhat, it doesn't contract. V'ilu yachnisu oto ba'esh, if you put it in fire, eno nisraf, it's fireproof. Barehayim, if you try to grind it, it will not get pulverized. But patish, if you take a hammer, eno mitpotzetz, you cannot shatter it. Vehu ha'etzem sheyesh bo kiyum nitzchi, it's the eternal bone. And he says it is from that bone that the human is going to be resurrected. The rest of the body will decay, but the luz bone remains intact. And he gives details how right before Mashiach comes, God's going to send down a dew from heaven, D-E-W, Muridatal, and the dew is going to hit the luz bone and soften it into like a piece of dough, and then it's going to expand, and that's where the regeneration and the resurrection is going to come from. Interesting. I didn't know that part of us is indestructible. We thought that the human being, at the end of the day, is perishable. I always thought the whole of the human being is perishable. Last night, again, so you get the advantage. You're always after Englewood, so you get all the Englewood stories. A young yeshiva guy came up to me after and he said, I don't believe what the Rav is saying. It's incredible. But I heard from a survivor in the Holocaust, from one of the camps, and his job was to shovel the ashes. And he says, it's an old man talking, he said, by word of honor, I came in contact with the ashes of Lo Alenu, thousands of burnt Jews, Hashem Yimkom Damam. And as I was shoveling the ashes, you always heard a click. You always heard a certain bone. There was always a little bone, hundreds of these little bones. He says, I saw the loose bone. It's true. When they put the Jews in the crematoriums, they were able to burn 99% of them. But there was an almond-sized limb, and I had contact with it, and I saw, and I heard them, and I touched it. So he says, it's true. And that's the bone where resurrection is going to take place from. But then the Bet Yosef says another trivia about the loose bone. Incidentally, it has another name. There's a synonym for the loose bone. I'm only telling it to you because if you go to another class and the rabbi uses the other name, you'll know it's the same thing. It's called Neskavi, not Nescafe, Neskavi. Okay, I don't know what that word means exactly, but that's what it's called. It's brought down in the books. So if you open up the Jewish thesaurus and you'll see the word lose, it'll bring the word right next to it, Neskavi. Okay, it's the same word. Says the Rav Bet Yosef from the Shibbolei HaLeket, the bone of resurrection and this eternal bone has a distinction more than any other part of the body, or over every part of the body, and that is, it doesn't eat or drink. That means when a person eats, the calories will be divided throughout the whole body. The loose bone takes nothing. En bo achila ve'en bo shetiyah. It seems it's on a perpetual fast. So then the question is, so how does it exist? I mean, it's a part of the body. It's got to have some sort of sustenance. So the Rab says there's one meal a week that the loose bone does benefit from. And that's the Motzei Shabbat Melave Malka. That food that the person eats on Motzei Shabbat directly benefits the loose bone. But the rest of the 6 days of the week, zero. That's why we should all be interested in strengthening that bone. And that's the bone that's going to give us eternity. That's the bone that basically gets us from Olam Hazeh to Olam Haba. You want it to be durable. So the next time you're contemplating, should I eat Melave Malka or not, even though you might not want to eat it, the loose bone does want to eat it. The loose bone saying, do me a favor, 6 days I don't eat anything. All I'm waiting is for a slice of pizza on Motzei Shabbat. Eat the pizza. Your stomach might not enjoy it, but the loose bone is going to get something from it. Now watch this. So by the way, that to me, that's a good resolution for the new year. I'm going to start eating Melave Malka. It's an easy one, another meal. It's not so difficult. But there's great value to it. The Motzei Shabbat Seudah is a Seudah that already prepares us for Olam Haba. It's preparing the equipment. It's preparing the limb that's going to be responsible for resurrection and regeneration. Now here's where it gets a little strange. There's a third name for this bone. I was happy with one name, to be honest with you. I didn't even need a second name, but there's a third name, and I have to tell it to you. Full disclosure. This is said by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He called it Betuel Rama'ah. And you know who Betuel was? Betuel was the father of Rivka. And he was a crook. And that's why he's called Betuel Rama'ah. Betuel, the shyster. Betuel, the wise guy. Now, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, guess what? The loose bone also is called Betuel Rama'ah. Now, that's not fair. Why in the world should such a holy bone? The poor bone doesn't eat for 6 days like the Gaon of Vilna's wife. It's the bone of resurrection. You can't destroy it. You can't burn it. You can't pulverize it. And we couldn't think of another name. Why don't you call it Mordechai HaTzadik? No, instead we call it Betuel Rama'ah. Betuel the crook. And that's not fair. That's defamation. You're maligning the poor bone. It's a tzaddik, and you give it such a name. It's not befitting. So I'd like to explain to you the depth of that name. Important information coming. So we just had Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary. It's not my anniversary, but it's the anniversary of Adam and Eve. It's the day they got married. It was a destination wedding in Gan Eden in paradise. All the bells and whistles. God already threw the party, so when God makes a party, he has the whole world at his fingertips. You can only imagine. The angels were in attendance. It was a momentous day for sure. And on that day, the snake was involved in one of the most tragic seductions ever the world has experienced. The seduction of Adam and Eve to eat from the tree. Now, that is the snake's job, by the way. The snake is called the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara, well listen, some classes are, the Yetzer Hara also has 3 names. He's called the Yetzer Hara, he's called the Satan, and he's called the Malach HaMavet. I can explain you all 3 names. Yetzer Hara is, his first job is to seduce you. That's to convince you. Do it. Everybody does it. It's okay. There's not going to be any repercussions. God doesn't care about this anyway. It's over. It's fine. So he's very, very convincing. Let's put it that way. That's called Yetzer Hara. Now, once he convinces us and we do it, he then becomes the Satan, which means he's the prosecutor, which is very, very unfair because when we get to court, who's prosecuting against us? The one that seduced us to do it in the first place. And we tell him, what are you doing? Well, I'm prosecuting against you. What do you mean against me? You're the one that told me to do it, that there's not going to be any repercussions. And what does he say? You shouldn't have listened. What are you listening to me for? You should listen to God. Yeah, but you told me I don't have to listen to God. Well, you know God is God. I'm the Yetzer Hara. You don't listen to the student in front of the rabbi. So he becomes now the prosecutor. And then when the courts in heaven say that the person deserves punishment, he then becomes the executor. He becomes the Malach HaMavet. So it says he's the Yetzer Hara, that's phase 1, seduction. Then he's the Satan, that's the prosecution. And then he's the executor, the Malach HaMavet. So you have to know that when he's seducing you, he's out to kill you. That's the end game. You're going to meet up with that seducer later on when you get to the penalty phase. Because he's the one that executes the punishment as well. That's Yetzer Hara, Satan, and Malach HaMavet. That explains his jobs. Well, He's been in business from day one. 5,784 years ago, on Rosh Hashanah, that's when he went into business. And he seduced Adam and Eve, and his intention was, just get them to eat the forbidden fruit. The forbidden fruit is poison. It's spiritually toxic. The Zohar even tells us the name of the toxic. It's called Zohama. All right, it's not COVID, but it's Zohama. And the Satan's end game was, if we can get Adam and Eve to eat, the Zohama will travel through their whole body. Once the body is filled with Zohama from top to bottom, there is no vaccine. I have no opinions on vaccines, incidentally, at least public opinions. But for sure, there is no vaccine for Zohama. And the goal of the snake was, get them to eat, their body will be filled with Zohama, there's no way they can recover, and the world will come to an end, and there will be no rectification, and it'll be over. And guess what? They ate. And the Satan is all smiling now as the forbidden fruit is trickling down every limb and every part of the body of Adam and Eve, and he was all excited. But ladies and gentlemen, which day of the week did they eat from the tree? Adam and Eve were born on a Friday. So they ate on a Friday. Wait, Friday is one of the 6 days of the week. There was a part of the body that did not get infected. The loose bone. The Satan actually got tricked. You know who tricked the Satan? Betuel Rama'ah. Betuel means Bat-El. It's the daughter of God. It's a heavenly limb. It was a Ramai. It tricked the trickster. The Satan said, you're infected, you'll never recover. And the loose bone said, ha, 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 you didn't get me. That's your mistake. If you would have fed this on Saturday night, then you would have got me. But you fed it a day early. And therefore, Adam and Eve have a place to recover. There's a part of them that remains pure, and that's where their recovery can come from. Because the food was given to them on Friday, the day of the week that the loose bone does not benefit from. Therefore, there was a certain part of the body that the Satan could not affect. Satan was able to affect 99% of the body, but he has no hold on the loose bone. And that's why it's called Betuel Rama'ah. Because it tricked the Satan. Satan walked away thinking, we got Adam Rishon, 100%. But when he looked at the CAT scan, he said, wait, there's a part of the body I see over here that the infection is not affecting. Why? The loose bone said, the last laugh is on Satan. Betuel Rama'ah. This divine limb was able to create a Rama'ut against Satan himself. That's it. That's the introduction. Now we can begin the class, Rabotai. So welcome. It's great to see you all again. I think this is the 9th year we've been doing this. I mean, it's a good introduction. A lot of information. But what does this got to do with Yom Kippur? That's the question. So back to the Arizal. So they asked the Arizal, which part of the body represents Yom Kippur? So he said, well, let's look at Yom Kippur for a second. Yom Kippur, there's no eating and there's no drinking. Which part of the body doesn't eat and doesn't drink? The loose bone. So he says, that's the part of the body of Yom Kippur. If you wanted a point, you put right here. That's the spot where Yom Kippur is represented. Because just like Yom Kippur, en bo lo achila velo shtiyah, for most of the week, there is no achila and shtiyah on that part of the body. The rest of the body is eating every day, some multiple times. But to lose bone, it's on a fast. That's Kippur. Furthermore, and I have good news to report. How many days of the year does the Satan work? Do you know his schedule? He works 364 days a year. There's one day that he's forced to take a vacation. The Gemara says, if you take the word Hasatan, that's his name, Hasatan, and you do the numerical value, Hey is 5, Sin is 300, Tet is 9, Nun is 50. Anyway, it's higher mathematics. If you add all those numbers together, it equals 364. So Hasatan is not only what he does, but when he does it. He only does it 364 days a year. And what's the day that he's forced to take off? Kippur. So there's no Satan on Kippur, which is a good thing for us. The prosecutor does not show up to court on Yom Kippur, so God, who is the judge, is able to just write, God willing, the good things without any resistance from Satan. So Kippur is also impervious from Satan. Which part of the body is impervious from Satan? The loose bone. Therefore, the loose bone is actually a physical structure, a physical entity that has all the properties of Yom Kippur. It's the part of the body that there's no eating, there's no drinking, and Satan wasn't able to influence it. Which is exactly Kippur. No eating, no drinking, and Satan doesn't work. So now we understand exactly Kippur is Olam Haba, and Kippur represents the limb in the body that is going to bring us to Olam Haba. Now let's go one step further. Many years ago when I was in Israel, studying for a couple of years after high school, it's the early 80s, mid 80s, I always liked books. I love books. So there used to be a merchant that would come in front of the yeshiva every couple of weeks, set up a table and sell books. My father gave me $200 for the whole year. My son spent $200 the first 15 minutes he was in Israel, but it's a different generation. I had $200, had to last from September to June. I spent most of it on books. Anyway, the first week he came, and I'm looking at these books, incredible. It's like a candy store. I see this little tiny book. It's a paperback. It's in a plastic bag. There's a rubber band around it. I thought that's very strange. What kind of book is in a plastic bag with a rubber band? And on the cover of it, there's a hand and an eyeball and all sorts of scary things. It caught my attention. Anyway, I opened the book. I unwrapped it. I don't know what's going to come out of it. I opened the book, and to my amazement, it's called Sefer Raziel HaMalach, authored by Adam HaRishon. Whoa, I didn't know we have books from Adam HaRishon. It's the oldest book of its kind. I told the guy, how much is this book? 1 shekel. $200, 1 shekel. I could afford it. I bought it. Turns out they told me you're really not supposed to read it. Not that I could understand it anyway. It was all Kabbalistic stuff. But put it in your house, and it's a protection against fire. Wherever this book is, it's fire retardant. It protects from fire. Okay. The book is still around. You can get it. I think it costs 2 shekel now. So that was my first book that I bought in Israel that year. 2 weeks later, he comes back again. I said, well, I struck gold. Adam HaRishon. Let me go try to find another book written by some of the early biblical tzaddikim. So I tell him, what else do you have in that category? Did Hava write any books? He said, no. Not even a cookbook? No. But if you're interested in books written by the greats, maybe you like this book. Okay, what is it? Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation. Okay? Open the front cover. Sefer Yetzirah, author Avraham Abinu. It's unbelievable. There's a book that we have in the library. It was written by Avraham Abinu. I bought the book. I felt it was just good luck to have it, to have something that Avraham Abinu wrote. There's a value to that. As I got older, I started to learn it. Deep stuff. I want to tell you what Avraham Abinu says in the book. It's a little philosophical. Avraham was a philosopher. He talks about the concept of Ashan. Now, I know you think Ashan means smoke. But Ashan actually is an acronym. Avraham Abinu said the ayin stands for olam, world, or we'll say it in our language, space, location, olam. Shana is year. We'll say it in our words, time. And nefesh is the person. What Avraham Abinu says is there's a connection between a location, time, and person. Let me elaborate. If we have a certain location in the world, Avraham Abinu was saying the location is connected to a certain time. A certain time of the year is connected to a certain place in the world. They resonate. I'll give you an example. The day of Yom Kippur. Where is the location of Yom Kippur on the map? Well, it's in Jerusalem. And if you really want to get technical, it's in Jerusalem in the Holy of Holies. So therefore, whereas Yom Kippur is the time on the calendar, its corresponding place on the map is the Holy of Holies. There is a certain correspondence or a resonance between space and time. It sounds philosophical, yes? Because it is. I mean, to me, that's a hidush. So when I get to the Holy of Holies, I am in the location of Yom Kippur. They meet. On the 10th of Tishri, in the Holy of Holies, space and time meet. And they're in harmony, because those two things go together. Now let's talk about the Holy of Holies for a minute. So what did the Kohen Gadol do in there? Now there's no cameras. It's a private session. Which is just an interesting point to know, that some of the greatest things in Jewish history happen without a camera. Today, you can't do anything without 3 cameras in your face, and if there's no camera, then you take a selfie. Guy goes to the restaurant, he's eating spaghetti and meatballs. He has to let everybody know that, because that's an important thing, so he has to take a picture, put it on the family chat. I'm eating spaghetti and meatballs. And everybody says, wow, that's amazing, incredible. I think the response is even worse than the picture. So today everything is a public, is public. There's nothing private anymore. But on Yom Kippur, the greatest moment of the year happens in privacy. There's no ring camera to anybody can see it. There's no review. There's no, 11 o'clock news. You can't watch the replay. So we only know from the Gemara what he did, or from the Torah. What did he do in the Holy of Holies? So we're told he brought a certain incense, ketoret, and he placed it down. Where did he place it? It says he placed it on the ark, in between the poles of the ark, by the Aron. But you must know that during the second temple there was no ark. The ark was taken into captivity. So where did he place it for 400 years? On the stone that was underneath the ark. That's called Even HaShetiyah. It's a rock. The Gemara says that rock is a very significant rock. It's the rock where the third temple is going to be rebuilt from. It's the bedrock of creation. That's where the word began. Adam Rishon was created from that rock, and it remains there forever. And when the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt, it is going to be resurrected from that rock itself. Can I ask you a question? What does that rock sound like? Exactly. It sounds like the loose bone to me. And now we understand why the Yom Kippur service is in Jerusalem by the Ibn HaShetiyah, because it resonates with its connection on the body. And we also understand that just like the loose bone is impervious from the Satan couldn't infect it, Yom Kippur also does not have Satan. He's forced to take off. He only works 364 days. Now, where in the service do we show that it is the loose bone that is the bone of Yom Kippur? Where do we show that in the service? In the Ma'azor, you're not going to see it. But we do something. During Musaf, I'm not sure it's your custom, but it's our custom, we bow. But we bow in a way that we don't bow any other time during the year. We bow all the way down, full prostration. So basically, our whole body is down and our head is also bent over. In that position, what is the highest part of your body? The loose bone. We put ourselves in a position in order to signify that today, that's the limb. That's the spot of Kippur. Now wait, there's a practical lesson to all this. Obviously there's a lesson. I'm getting to the lesson in a minute. But first I have to establish my case. You know something that 99% of the population doesn't know. This Arizal is a find. So the Kohen Gadol goes to the Holy of Holies. What is he wearing? Well, normally the Kohen Gadol wears 8 garments. When he goes to the Holy of Holies, he only wears 4 of them. Do you know what the 4 are called? There's a name for those 4 garments. Oh, I'm glad I came tonight. Bigdei Lavan. They're the whites. You see, the other garments are colorful. He doesn't wear any colors in the Holy of Holies. He wears the 4 garments that are white. They are called Bigdei Lavan. The Ben Ish Chai says, you know why it's called Lavan? Well, I told you why, because it's white. That's easy answer. Yom Kippur corresponds the bone. What is it called, that bone? Luz. What else is it called? Betuel Rama'ah. What else is it called? Neskavi. Lavan is Rashi Tevot. Luz, Betuel Rama'ah, Neskavi. The Kohen wears the Bigdei Lavan. That's an allusion to that concept where Yom Kippur is found. It's the eternal bone, the bone of Olam Haba. Incidentally, after Yom Kippur, somebody would ask me, what's the first sin that we commit? At least the men for sure. What's the first sin of the year? I'll tell you what it is. When the rabbi gets up after Yom Kippur is over and says, the moon is clear, Birkat Levana, and everybody says, oh no. They were hoping it was cloudy because they've been doing this for 25 hours. They want to go home and eat. So that's the first sin of the year. You finally have a mitzvah to fulfill, and your reaction is, oh my gosh, the last thing I want to do is now make another blessing. So don't make that mistake. When the rabbi announces that the moon is clear, even if you don't believe it, fool yourself and say, yes, yay. And what is it called? Birkat Levana. No coincidence. Small little sliver of the moon. We make Levana. Lavan also is the first 3 letters. We're finishing the day with our version of Bigdei Lavan, Birkat Levana. So now that we have an understanding of where Yom Kippur is, it's a Shabbat, it's Olam Haba, there's no Achilah, there's no Shtiyah, there's no Satan. On the body, we found that same part that represents Kippur perfectly, the loose bone that doesn't eat, that doesn't drink, that the Satan was not able to affect. And the lesson is, it's very, very possible that when you come to this world, we can forget that there's a world after this world. It's easy to forget that there's life after life. The world is very enticing. It looks real. And there's a lot of things that are enjoyable, that draw attention. And we become preoccupied with this world. And the Satan is an expert at creating the optical illusion in us thinking that it's this world. Eat and be merry today, for tomorrow you shall die. I was once on a plane, and we were experiencing severe turbulence. So, as much as I read about turbulence, that they have nothing to worry about, but you still get scared. I took out my Tehillim book and started to make some vows and write checks to tzedakah. The guy next to me is pushing the button to call the stewardess. I thought he was in trouble. He's pushing the button, and the stewardess cannot get up there. They're also seat belted. And she's going like this. What do you want? He said, you gotta come, you gotta come, you gotta come. I thought it was something serious. And the stewardess wobbles to the seat and says, what is the matter? He says, I need a double scotch on the rocks. He says, now? He says, yeah, if I'm gonna die, at least one more scotch before I die. So that's the attitude. Listen, you only live once. So if I'm going to go, let me go in style. Let me have one more drink. The last fling. Yom Kippur is a stop sign. It reminds us there is Olam Haba. This world is only a bridge. It's a vestibule. It's a station stop. It's a station, but it's not a destination. Olam Hazeh is point A, but the goal is to get to point B, and we forget it during the year. Like Maimonides says, we get caught up with Havle Hazman, with the frivolities of this world. Yom Kippur says, hold it. Your body and all of you, 99% of us, is going to decay. There's not going to be nothing left. Only one part's going to be left, and that's the transit. That's the entry to Olam Haba. The bone, the loose bone. At the end of the day, that's all you have left. And lo achila, lo shtiya, it doesn't get involved in eating and drinking, conspicuous consumption. It saves its pleasure to the end. After the week is over, after the world is over, Motzei Shabbat, the week has come to an end, then it pleasures itself. It means to say that the real pleasure is not in this world. You have to wait till the end of the week, till the 7 days, or we could say the 70 years of man passes. Then you could have the Melave Malka. Then you have Seudat Revi'it. That's when Olam Haba is. Let the lesson of the loose bone teach us that. Defer the pleasure. Now, of course, I'm not telling you no pleasure. We know you can't have no pleasure. Of course, you have to enjoy. But when that becomes an obsession, when it turns into a full-time job, when work turns into workaholism, and when eating turns into gluttony, and when enjoyment turns into addiction, then already we've gone too far. And that means we have forgotten that there's more to this world. There's something that comes after. Yom Kippur reminds us about Olam Haba. So we enter Olam Haba for 25 hours to remind you, this is what it's all about. There's going to come a moment in our existence where there's no eating, no drinking, no Satan. From time to time during the service, put your finger on the back over here just to feel it. Massage the bone. Just to remember that that's at the end of the day, that's where it's going to be. That's the limb of Yom Kippur. And I will conclude. My grandfather, Alav Shalom, was a very hospitable man. He would always have rabbis at his house in Deal. He lived in Deal all year round. And we would visit my grandfather from time to time. And we always enjoyed his Friday night table because he always had some notable rabbis that would come to grace his table. There was one rabbi that came, his name was Rabbi Abraham Salem. He's still alive today. Rabbi Rosh Hashiva in Jerusalem. I was a young kid, he was sitting at the table. So my grandfather says, Rabbi Abraham, please tell my family a story of Jerusalem, of the rabbis, of the old days. So he blushed a little, he said, is it okay if I tell a story about myself? Those are the best stories. He said, well, my parents, my father, Rabbi Natan Salim, and my mother, the Tzaddiket, were unable to have children. For many years, they were barren. And after many years, they went to a big rabbi, Rabbi Yom Tov Yosef Yedid Halevi, old rabbi in Jerusalem, who was known that his blessings are blessings. And he told my mother, you'll have a baby boy this year. And that's a prediction, because they were 17 or 18 years not having children, for him to predict baby boy this year, against all odds. Anyway, shortly after the prediction, Rabbi Yom Tov Yosef Yedid Halevi passed away. So the couple felt that there goes the blessing. With the rabbi's passing, he took the blessing with him. So they felt a little dismayed or discouraged. Rabbi Yom Tov Yosef Yedid Halevi comes to Rabbi Natan Salim in a dream. And he says, listen, I know you think because I died you're not getting the blessing. The blessing is there. Baby boy within the year. So now, Rabbi Abraham is telling the story about his father now in the dream. He says, my father had Rabbi Yedid on the line now. He's in heaven. So he says, could you tell me what's going on up there? A little inside information, insider trading. He says, I can't tell you. I really can't tell you. We're not allowed to disclose. But I'll tell you one thing. Those that keep mitzvot and those that follow the Torah, you have nothing to worry about. It is the most pleasurable experience. There's nothing to talk about. He says, and then the dream ended and I was born 9 months later. He said, I'm the product of that dream. I'm the product of that blessing. But more importantly, my father was able to get inside information from somebody that was there. So it's a reality. There are testimonies. We know that there has to be more to this world. God will not just bring us to this world that's filled with problems and troubles and agony, and then it just ends. And it usually ends when we're at our peak. So that's a prank, that's a bad joke on humanity. The moment that a person becomes accomplished, as he starts to become successful, and then he ages out and it's over. And then what? There has to be life after life. And Yom Kippur reminds us of that. And you need one day a year to remember it. And hopefully that there's an aftermath. Don't forget to eat Motzei Kippur when the fast is over. And I don't have to remind you of that. But don't forget that when Yom Kippur ends, it's also Motzei Shabbat. Because Kippur is called Shabbat Shabbaton. So when you eat the meal on Motzei Kippur, I would venture to say that the loose bone will benefit. And it deserves a good meal after giving us that lesson for 25 hours during Kippur. My blessing is to the members that are assembled here tonight. May you be able to experience not only Olam Haba on this coming Shabbat. That's Olam Haba with eating and drinking. Try to experience the real culture of Olam Haba, belo achila, belo shtiya, just with ruhniyut, without the Satan's interference. That's Yom Kippur. And then Be'ezat Hashem, just like you'll experience Olam Haba be'olam hazeh, my blessing is you should experience Olam Haba be'olam haba itself. Tizku l'shanim rabot, ne'imot v'tovot.